I just feel like I was saying, I feel like they're kind of being ranked on reputation here, putting them at top 5 because this feels like the most unproven roster of the Kirby Smart era. I think when I look at this, who Georgia brings back, this is really just the most unproven roster I can remember. Georgia always seems to have, maybe one or two guys that are a preseason All-American, maybe a handful, but depending on what year, that are like potential first round picks. And you just look at this year's roster, like go through the years. Like we went into last year, Malachi Starks, Michael Williams, potential top 5, top 10 picks. Like Jalen Walker was a guy that was freaky, that you knew getting more first team reps, that he was gonna, be that potential first rounder. Carson Beck had, potential uh number one overall potential coming into the season. If he could be that first quarterback. And like last year, you had Brock Bowers, Amarius Mims, even guys like Kamari Lassiter, Javon Bullard, Cedric Van Pran were getting like All-American type of looks, if not first round pick. You go to 2022, Jalen Carter, Broderick Jones, Nolan Smith, Keely Ringo. Ringo was a little disappointing, I think, for most people in 2022, but still a hell of a player. Ended up going like third round, I think, with some like injury concerns. And he's been a backup for most of his career so far. But like you've had these proven guys. 2021 was just loaded with them. The Jordan Davis, Trayvon Walker, Quay Walker, like all these guys were kind of potential first round picks coming into the year, and Nakobe Dean. And then guys like Devontae Wyatt, Lewis Seen became first round picks. But even from like a George Pickens was supposed to be on that team, and obviously he was on 2020 and 2019 as like a potential first round type talent. And you had the leadership too. So a guy like Jamari Sawyer, like 2020 had Eric Stokes, Azeez Ojulari, Tyson Campbell, like and even guys like Ben Cleveland and Richard LeCount were those guys, experienced guys that were getting, at least all SEC, potential All-American type of praise coming into the season. And I'm trying to speak specifically as like what these guys were preseason, not necessarily what they ended up doing those years. But like 2019, Andrew Thomas was like the potential number 1 overall pick in the draft. It ended up going number 2. Isaiah Wilson, first rounder. DeAndre Swift, the potential best running back in the country going into his junior year. 2018, DeAndre Baker was the returning Thorpe Award winner. Like you had a guy like Mecole Hardman that was at least like a, one of these 4-3 type guys. And, he didn't necessarily have the season that he wanted. That receiver core was really just loaded in 2018. And no one really put up big stats. And then you go back to 2017, like year 2 of Kirby Smart. Roquan Smith that year was getting a lot of hype. You had Chubb and Michelle, this well-known duo that came back for their senior year. Lorenzo Carter, that was just a freaky athlete people knew about, that had potential like first round, capability. I think he ended up going second round, maybe third. But he was just that kind of guy. And this team just doesn't really have that. Like there's not the projected first rounder, not the projected All-American, not even really that known like leadership type guys. Like quarterback and offensive line are kind of those positions that tend to be like leadership positions on the offensive line, on the offensive side. And there's no, you got a new starter at quarterback, and the team seems to rally around Gunner, right? He's the kind of whatever, he feels the working class kind of QB, it feels like, right? He's gritty. He drives the 1988 pickup truck or whatever. But it's a position where you don't have a proven starter, and so a quarterback is always one of the leadership positions, and maybe Gunnar Stockton is that, and he takes the job and runs with it and has a great season. But there's no Tate Ratledge type guy, a Cedric Van Pran, a Jamari Sawyer type guy that just you just trust, of like one of those kind of upperclassmen. This team just doesn't really have that. There's no like real guy that, and like I'm saying, like potential first rounder, there's no guy we really know about right now that's just kind of that freaky athlete, like that's just a prototype, like an Andrew Thomas or a Marius Mims or a Broderick Jones. Like this team has recruited well, but we just don't really know a lot about these guys. And so it's going to be a very interesting year because we've talked about how this schedule is just flipped from a year ago. So it's going to be really tough again. Maybe it's a little easier with some of those home games, but it's all in all, it's the most unproven team I can ever remember under Kirby Smart. So it's it'll be an interesting year. I think that's for sure. Nolan Smith, put it on a t-shirt. Dogs are going 7-5. You heard it here. Put it in a hype video. Everyone's doubting you. All in all, yeah, it's just the most unproven team I can remember. Now let's talk about those guys that they are bringing back in 2025. So the cupboard is far from bare in Athens, Georgia. But like I said before, I just can't remember a year without a true like face of the franchise kind of guy, if you will. Like I was literally racking my brain on who I should put in the thumbnail for this video. I'm just like, well, last year, Malachi Starks was the guy you saw in like every Georgia promo, or it was Carson Beck. It was like there was just those faces that you'd seen for multiple years. And right now, who are the most proven players on this Georgia roster? Like I'm thinking on the offensive side of the ball, you got Nate Frazier, Oscar Delp, and Lawson Lucky. Like at the tight end position seems solid for sure. But you're not going to win a lot of games, regardless of what the Brock Bowers era has taught some of you people. You're not going to win many games when your tight end is your best offensive playmaker. Brock Bowers was an absolute unicorn. And yeah, if the tight end is the best player on your team, then feed him the rock like Brock Bowers. But Oscar Delp and Lawson Lucky are just very solid tight ends. Like I think very good complementary pieces. I'm not here to bash those guys. Bowers was just generational. And then you look at the offensive line, a Monroe Freeling obviously did not have a good showing to end the season against Notre Dame. An Ernest Green who I think he got hurt and then just kind of lost snaps throughout the season. And so you saw them kind of play those three guys, Green, Freeling, and Xavier Truss at the tackle positions this year. But you lose Truss, you lose the two guards, Ratledge and Fairchild, and then you lose the center, Jared Wilson. Like that's just a lot to lose on an offensive line, as well as, as bad as the receivers were at times for Georgia, as much, and I hate saying they were bad, but I mean, you lead the nation in drops. They weren't performing to their standard. Let's put it that way. And then you also add Trevor Etienne onto that. Like it's a lot of unproven guys on that offensive side of the ball. We know some of the talent that's in that running back room, but it's also some guys that have kind of yet to stay healthy in multiple years on campus. So after Nate Frazier, Cash Jones played the most a year ago, but he's, more used in the receiving game and in pass protection. So you kind of know it's a pass play when Cash Jones is in there. But I mean, that type of back definitely, plays a role in an offense. You need a guy that can be good out of the catching the ball out of the backfield, especially in pass protection. But yeah, you didn't bring in a bunch of highly ranked running backs in this year's class. You had the decommitment on signing day to Florida State. So, it's interesting. And then you look on the defensive side of the ball, like that's where all the 5-star recruits are always in Kirby Smart's recruiting classes. And you got a CJ Allen and Raylan Wilson, two guys that, played really, really well. Like these guys are not Nakobe Dean and Quay Walker. They're the starters and they're returning, but they're not guys that are really getting first round talk right now. And maybe they do. Maybe they have a great season and they become that. They were big time prospects coming out of high school. But you got a Dalen Everett who, played out of his mind against Texas both times. But, he definitely gave up some plays in the pass game, but I think he's definitely your best corner coming into the year. And then Christian Miller, it was big to bring him back on the defensive line. And then KJ Bolden, obviously he's not a player who can get drafted next year, coming into his sophomore year. But KJ Bolden feels like one of those guys, probably the guy that's got the most. It feels like if one player on Georgia's defense becomes a star next year, KJ Bolden feels like the best candidate for that, just after having such a good freshman season. But yeah, like they're just a lot of solid pieces that we're bringing back defensively. So it'll be interesting. But what we have to remember here is that Kirby Smart is the best recruiter in college football. And if that still matters, I guess, I think Benjamin Franklin is probably the best recruiter in college football these days. But as long as it still matters, Kirby Smart knows how to get damn good classes. And the 2024 class was the #1 recruiting class in the country.